"I have to go," I said to the receptionist. I turned away from them and made to leave. "Oh, and Mrs. Acland," Cassie called out to me. "Yes," I responded, looking back at the ladies. "We were told by Mr. Acland to tell you not to go to his home, demanding to see him either," the woman said. "Sure," I responded, uninterested. I then turned away and continued to make my way to the exit entrance. I heard them talking about me as I walked away. "Well, today she didn't put up a fight, did she?" the other receptionist said. "Yesterday she stayed for hours." "She'll be back tomorrow," Cassie said. "When will that poor woman realize the chairman doesn't want her?" Cassie's words struck a nerve in me. That's right, everyone looked down on me. I was seen as the poor abandoned wife whom was desperate for Keith's attention. I left the building and was met with the busy city street of Yorkshire City. An afternoon sun shone on my face as a cool breeze swept by. I contemplated the last thing Cassie had said. She said I shouldn't go to his house, meaning this was a point in time I had already been moved out of the main house and to a separate house. I took out my phone from my handbag. I checked for the date and time. It was Saturday, 3 April 2015. This was nearly a year since Keith had had my son, and I moved out of the main mansion, and almost 3 years since Diana returned to Keith's life. Suddenly, a car pulled up by the building entrance beside me. I turned to see a fancy black sedan parked by the drop-off point. The driver came out of the car and went to the passenger side door at the back. 2 other men who were large and menacing-looking came out and rushed to the door where the driver was. As the driver opened the door, a woman came out. The 2 men, her bodyguards, helped her. My eyes widened in horror as I recognized the person. It was Diana. She was a beautiful, tall, slim woman with blonde, curled hair and green eyes. She was dressed well, looking like she was already the chairman's wife. She was definitely here to see Keith. He obviously suddenly wouldn't be too busy to see her. Then our eyes met. My eyes widened in surprise as I realized that I was just standing on the sidewalk looking at Diana. "Jasmine, is that you?" she said in that cold yet polite-sounding voice of hers. If I didn't know her well, I would have, though she was nice. "Diana," I said. "I see you're here as usual. Another day successfully meeting with Keith?" she then asked before laughing hysterically. She knew dang well I hadn't seen him. Then she got closer to me right till she was in my face. "I have taken back what belongs to me. No matter what happens, he will never listen to you." She was trying to bait me into fighting her. In the past, it always worked, and I would always attack her and then get in trouble with Keith. Memories came to mind of the countless times she would bait me into making myself look bad, and I would end up looking crazy. "I have to go," I said to her. Jasmine's POV. "I have to go," I said to Diana. "Not in the mood to talk today," she asked me. In my past life, I would have taken the bait and gotten into it with her. I absolutely couldn't stand Diana. However, I should have always known that Diana would always win against me. It always angered me how she could smear my name, no matter what I tried. I hated to admit it, but she was good. Without responding to her, I turned away from her and began to walk away. I knew better than to engage with her now. I continued to make my way home. It was a Saturday, which meant Anthony was at home, not at school since it was a weekend. I had left him alone so I could try to meet with Keith. I was instantly ashamed of myself for having left him alone. Whenever I left Anthony at home, I always told him never to open the door for strangers or answer the doorbell, plus we lived in a gated, protected neighborhood. Still, it wasn't a good look. It's just that I couldn't take him with me and have him see me yelling at people. I went to the bus stop and took the bus home. Like Diana, I too was supposed to have a car and driver to drive me around from place to place, but due to a certain situation, I couldn't. I arrived in the gated neighborhood where I lived. Upon arriving at the house, I stood in front and took a look. The home Keith had Anthony and me moved to was certainly not the massive mansion he lived in with Diana. However, it was still a beautiful home in a nice neighborhood. I unlocked the door and went inside. I found Anthony seated at the table in the dining room, drawing something. When he heard me enter, he looked in my direction. "Mummy," he said excitedly as he left the table and ran to me. "Tony," I greeted him excitedly. I opened my arms and picked him up. "You came home early today," he said, so relieved. "Last time you came home late when you went to talk to Daddy." Suddenly, the conversation I'd had with his older self about how I was never there came to mind. I then felt my eyes fill with tears, and I began to silently cry. I'd been doing it to him for a long time. No wonder he ended up resenting me. I hugged him even tighter. "Whoa, Mum, I can't breathe," he giggled. "I'm sorry, don't worry. I won't leave you alone like that again," I assured him. "Really?" he asked me as we broke from the hug. I nodded my head in promise to him. "Why are you crying?" he asked me, concerned. The whole reason for me coming back was to be here for him. He had short chestnut brown hair, green eyes, and an olive skin tone. He smiled at me, and I noticed a gap in his teeth from a tooth that had fallen out. He was so adorable, I thought to myself. It was a little strange seeing him so young again, but he was the same old Tony I knew. He was 9 years old in 2015. "I'll be back," I told him as I put my handbag down. I went to the bathroom. There's something I wanted to see. In the mirror by the sink, I looked at myself. I was completely taken aback by the image of the woman staring back at me. I was back to my healthier, younger self from 7 years earlier. In the 2 years leading up to my death, I had become frail, looking like the shell of who I once was, despite only being in my 30s. I brought my hands to my cheeks and slapped them hard. A sharp pain filled my cheeks. I had to confirm if I was dreaming once again. Still appeared to be real. I remembered my dying wish, which was to be able to redo my life and fix all the wrongs I'd done to my child. Had my wish really come true? It was hard to believe. Nonetheless, I was so grateful. I had a chance to fix things. Now the question was, how was I going to do that? Clearly, what I'd tried to do before in my previous life failed dismally. I kept trying to get Keith's attention because I was his first legal wife, and my son was the rightful heir to his company. I believed then and still believe now that Anthony had every right to that. Even after Keith divorced me and married Diana to make her son the heir, I got a lawyer involved and tried to take him to court. Unfortunately, I lost the court case since I was no match for a billionaire with lots of resources. I had just wanted to make sure Anthony got what was rightfully his, but I failed. To make matters worse, I ended up dying, leaving him completely alone and with no financial security. I had failed as a parent. If I'm 29 again now, I have about 7 years until I'm scheduled to die. This time around, I had to make sure I left Anthony with something. Now I had to figure out how I was going to do that. I continued to look at myself in the bathroom mirror. I took in my features, my long, chestnut brown hair, my green eyes, and my olive skin. Anthony had nearly copied and pasted all my features. I thought of how Tony, looking similar to me, had had people questioning whether he was actually Keith's son. First of all, I had the birth certificate to prove it. I had never been with another man my entire life. What's more, as Anthony grew older, his facial and body structure began to look more like Keith's. I thought of Tony when he was 16. He looked like Keith, but with a different skin tone and hair color. I shook my head as I thought of all the slander Diana had put us through. I tried to turn on the sink tap to splash some water on my face, but no water came out. I tried to turn on the sink tap to splash some water on my face, but no water came out. I was confused for a moment before I then remembered the predicament my son and I typically faced in this house. I looked around and found a large bucket with collected water inside it to use instead. I then went to the light switch and tried to switch it on. It didn't turn on. We had no power or water. Courtesy of Diana, of course. I walked out of the bathroom and looked at the state of the house as I made my way back to the dining room. It was in disarray. I hadn't noticed it before since I was more focused on Tony. We were also supposed to have maids to help clean the home, as well as a chef and gardener, but thanks to Diana, we didn't. When Keith kicked me and my son out of the main house, he then appointed the duties I had handled as his wife to her. Even though at the time I was still his wife. The wife's duties included hiring staff for the home, maids, gardeners, chefs, etc., handling the finances of the home, salaries of workers, money for things required in the home, like furniture, ingredients chefs needed, etc. So, when it came to me, Keith would give the order for what he wanted done, but ultimately Diana was responsible for carrying out his orders, and he trusted she would do it. Out of spite for me, Diana did as much as she could to inconvenience my life. What's more, she knew there was nothing I could do about it. I had already ruined my relationship with Keith, so he had no interest checking in on what was going on with me. He just assumed Diana was doing her part. Most of the time, the reason I went to see Keith so often was to try to and inform him of the situation I was in. However, he thought I was just trying to annoy him about making Anthony his heir. It had only been about 6-7 months since I started living here, and about 3-4 months since Diana started her shenanigans of stopping the maids from working in the house, cutting the electricity, etc. The problem is I was a billionaire's wife who'd never had to work a day in her life. Even before I got married, I was pampered in everything I did. So I wasn't used to cleaning after myself, let alone a whole house. As time passed with no change in the situation, I was forced to learn to clean and even to cook. Now with all my experience, I could get right to work with no issue. But the inconveniences with Diana didn't end there. I took my phone out and I checked my bank account to see how much I had. I only had $1,000. As I was still his wife, Keith had organized for me to receive a monthly allowance of $50,000. However, Diana made sure I never received the full amount. She would only give me a fraction of the amount each month, typically $1,000, and on top of that make sure I received it late. In short, I was made to feel like a beggar waiting for handouts. Before I could even think about how to be there for my son and formulating a plan to ensure he was financially secure in 7 years' time, I had solved this issue of Diana's meddling. If I could, I would turn to my family for help, but I couldn't rely on them either. I thought of my father and brother who had mercilessly abandoned me after Keith abandoned me as well. They believed the rumors just like everyone else and thought I was the problem. The quickest way to solve that issue would be to make my own money by getting a job. The problem, however, was that I got married at 19, which is around the time people went to university college, and I didn't go, since I was told to focus on being a wife, which meant I couldn't get a higher education job that paid more. I could only get small jobs like being a waitress, barista, shop clear, etc. In my previous life around this time, I doubt I would have been able to take on such a job since I'd never worked before, let alone even consider it. Going from a billionaire lifestyle to ordinary, one was quite the jump. But now, I certainly could take on the task with no issue. If anyone from my life before found out I was working a 9-to-5, they would probably laugh at me, but that didn't matter. I would forget about my pride and focus on what was more important, which was Anthony. As for how I should go about the issue pertaining to Diana and Keith, for starters, I think it would be best to completely forget about trying to fight with Keith to make. It didn't matter to him whether Anthony was the rightful heir or not. His choice was always going to be Diana and her son, no matter what. I had to give up trying to fight for that, considering Tony himself in the future isn't even interested being the heir. So my strategy should be doing the next best thing to achieve my goal. I didn't want him to end up alone, neither did I want to leave him with nothing. Honestly, if it wasn't for Diana's sabotaging, with Keith's arrangement alone, there was so much I could do to try to ensure my son's future was secured. I could put most of the money in a savings accounts for Tony to use when he was older. I could invest in projects to make more money. "What's wrong, Mum?" Anthony asked me, bringing me out of my thoughts. He was probably noticing I was deep in thought. "Nothing," I told him. I then looked at the time. It was around 5 p.m. It was going to get dark soon, and we would need to have dinner. "Anyway, are you hungry? We can make something to eat." He asked me in surprise, "You're going to cook?" He asked me in disbelief.